We're talking Yamamoto, Matsui, and more on a Friday episode. Let's go.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Alongside Sam Olber, I'm Matt Cozy. Please support the show by following on your preferred audio platform, and you can watch, subscribe, and leave a comment on YouTube. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Sam and I are lifelong fans, taking our passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Today's Friday episode is presented by Jace Medical. Power yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's Jace, J-A-S-E medical.com. Sam is out, and we'll be back next week. Ty Lewin is here co-hosting with me today as we finish off another work week. I have traded messages with Ty and have had conversations since last winter. I believe, actually, after reaching out to him first, and Ty is a big Cubs fan, has been podcasting on his own as well, and it's excited to join us here out of the bullpen. Ty, welcome to the show.
Matt, thank you, man. I mean, this is really cool opportunity. Like you said, we've been trading messages for a long time. I've also been an everydayer for the entire year, going through the ebbs and flows of the season. And ebbs and flows, you can make your description of that depending on how Sam and Matt were feeling that day. But, you know, this has been just such a fantastic show to listen to on a daily basis. And for everyone that's listening could probably agree that if you're either going to school, work, or wherever you're going, it's really nice to throw you guys on. So to be on this show, let's just say I'm getting the varsity call up, and I didn't think I was getting that call. So this is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, we're going to lead off with 2 possible targets from Japan for the Cubs as they seek to boost their pitching this offseason. The Athletic reported earlier this week the Cubs are one of 5 teams. So we're going to, quote, make a serious run, close quote, at Yamamoto. The report added Yamamoto wants to play in a large market, and contrary to some belief out there, although it's been dispelled in the last few years, is open to playing with another Japanese player. That was a misnomer dating back to the Ichiro days, as several players from Japan have really had an impact in the major leagues. Ty's going to get into some of Yamamoto's pitching specifically, some career stats. Let me just tell you a couple things first. 8 years in the NPB, despite being only 25 years old. And this past season, it was like a video game. 1.16 ERA and 176 strikeouts in 171 innings this past season. Ty, I got one theme for the episode. It's adding impact talent. And Yamamoto was that, and the Cubs have to be in on him.
I couldn't agree more. And you think about this year, I heard a lot of people have their take that it reminded them of 2015. I disagreed in a way because it felt like they didn't have enough. And that was sort of, expectations at the beginning of the year were sort of back and forth as to where they can go. And as we saw with the season, it came down to depth, and they just didn't have enough. And I give a lot of credit to guys that really, came out of their shell and, executed at such a high level towards the end of the year. But a lot of these guys weren't ready for it. And if this team truly wants to make a mark moving forward, like Dansby Swanson is in Jed Hoyer's ear every single day, probably trying to get more depth, I think that needs to be the key word of this entire episode, is that the Cubs need it for next year. And like you guys said on the episode, this week, that you saw it with the Rangers and D-backs right now. We talk about regular season versus playoff teams, and we're going to need that moving forward. And this is one guy that I think could really, really take us in the right direction.
So let's have you share some of what you found in your prep on Yamamoto, because I feel like he would be slotted right after Steele in the rotation and has that possibility of having the qualities, the characteristics of a number one, and can impact immediately, like Senga did in Queens this past year. What have you found on Yamamoto?
Well, you said it earlier with his stats, right? He had a video game like year, and he's had a video game like career with the
Okay.
MPB. I mean, a 68 and 29 record with a 1.84 ERA, 910 Ks to 204 walks over a career of 883 innings. That's a guy that has shown to stay healthy, which is something that you guys talked about the other day with Nola. This is a guy that not only has been one of the only two other pitchers with at least 880 innings in the history of the MPB, maintaining a career ERA below 2, one of them being Yu Darvish.
Okay.
And the craziest of them all, he has thrown 2 no-hitters in 2 consecutive seasons, and the last one was in front of a lot of GMs. And when we're talking about with what is going to be needed for Yamamoto, there were a lot of GMs, like I said, that were in that cheering section watching that game. It's going to take a big dollar, but the Cubs, we've heard it before. If they're willing, if the Ricketts are saying that we are willing to pay and Jed's willing to make those moves, this is a guy we got to pick up. He comes in with a pitching arsenal of a 4-seam fastball with a forkball and curveball. Those are his top 3 pitches.
Okay.
Pretty ridiculous stats across the board with his fastball. Hitters just hitting 176 against it. And then his forkball, which of course, in the day of baseball of sweepers and sliders and fastballs, you don't hear this pitch too much. But hitters are hitting a batting average of 172 against it with a 22.8% whiff rate. He's got an arsenal that's ready to go, and I saw a couple videos. He's got depth on his curveball as well. His forkball goes in 5 different directions. He's a guy the Cubs need to get.
Yeah, and you look at most of what you have already internally is coming back in 2024, or you hope so. You got Steele, you have Hendricks, at least for 24, if not longer. Tyone is signed up. Wicks is coming back. I know you like him, Ty. We'll see about Stroman, but you have a lot of dudes now who have experience, and you already have enough for a rotation, but it's not enough. And so I think Yamamoto sitting at the top there would be thrilling. But you did already mention it. Are they going to pay? I think the number could start with a 2. Now, for someone that's thrown 0 pitches in the major leagues, that is just by default a risk.
It truly is. And I heard this when I was doing some research today on him, and they talk about pitchers coming over to the U.S. And in Japan, notoriously, they go longer in their starts. I don't have the numbers to say what exactly those numbers are, but what they've said is that they are willing to let these guys go longer, and they're willing to, be able to go out there and throw multiple innings. And you think about the money that's going to be needed. He's obviously going to beat Tanaka's deal that he got back in 2014 of 7-year at 155. I think that's almost an easy answer there. A shoo-in, yeah. And I also think too that if we're so concerned about health all the time, then why pick up any of these guys? Why pick up a guy like Nola? He's had some miles on his arm. So if we continue to be so concerned about this rather than going out and getting the depth needed, the Rangers, like you guys said, had 2 guys on the bench that were their highest paid guys that almost didn't even see the mound this year, and both Scherzer and DeGrom. So why keep waiting? And I think the Cubs need to make a splash with this.
And last winter, DeGrom was really the first big signing, if you remember that Saturday or Sunday prior to the winter meetings. I wonder if we see a pitcher lead the charge this December again, perhaps even November. I have to imagine Yamamoto and Matsui, who we'll discuss in a minute, will probably be around that winter meetings time. And I am excited to see what's ahead for that. Your thoughts on, or let me ask it this way: how much do you subscribe to the theory of pitching depth and rotational consistency in terms of the volume of pitchers, or is it more of the quality of guys you have?
That's a great question. There's both sides have an angle there, right? Because I think about like the Rangers, for example. Like Dane Dunning was a guy the entire year that I do fantasy baseball, so I just kind of saw that he was a guy that was kind of picked up here or there, but he was a guy that over the course of the entire year did establish himself as a solid fourth, fifth depth guy, right? So those scenarios, having those guys for the long-standing part of the year is outstanding. But if we're thinking, like we said earlier, we were talking about regular season or playoffs, that's where it gets really difficult because your regular season, the depth has to be there for the entire year, as we saw with the Cubs. But then your quality has to be outstanding for the playoffs. And that's your, seventh, eighth, ninth inning guy, but also too, going out there and having guys that can throw 3 or 4 quality innings, like we said. I would love a perfect mixture of both. But if we want to get in the playoffs, to get into the playoffs, we have to get in, right? So I think I'd rather have where guys are able to give quality starts over the course of the year and being able to put miles on their arm versus we're just throwing out 5 of the best guys, because we saw if one of those guys gets hurt, you're not going to have any shot. So.
And Yuki Matsui should be a target for the Cubs as well. He would help out of the bullpen. And sure enough, 670 the scores. Bruce Levine last weekend said just as much. Matsui is a left-handed relief pitcher, 10 years, a decade in the NPB, but still only 28. He is 5'8", and that has had some perhaps unfair durability question marks about him. Curious to get your thoughts on that. And then questions if his stuff will play. So you could tell us about that as well. Matsui last year, 72 strikeouts, 1.57 ERA in 57 innings. Ty, I think he's a great bullpen option. And if not the closer, where I think Alzolay should be, then he could be a 7th or 8th inning dude.
Absolutely. And the ideal scenario would be get both these guys, because then you can throw Wicks in the pen, and then Wicks can be that backup arm in case, let's say Matsui has any injuries or anything to worry about. One of the weirdest concerns that I've seen, and I wrote this down. So I did not know this, that in Japan, they actually use a smaller baseball. They use a smaller baseball, and it's also a harder baseball. I know this is just a kind of a side note here.
Harder baseball, I knew. Smaller?
Smaller. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was looking through this stuff, and it popped up on kind of multiple articles where it said, when he came and pitched in the WBC, which was limited appearances, but they did say he did struggle with that fastball slider command moving to that new baseball. Now, how much you want to buy into that? Is your decision. But I personally think Sam said it best the other night. He said, if the depth word that we talk about, can you just roll out guys at after each individual inning where you're confident, right? So if I'm going out there with Matsui and Wicks as my lefties out of the pen, and I'm able to leave Alzolay, we're in a much better position. And these bullpen arms, are, unfortunately with these young guys, are so volatile in where they go. So I see Matsui as a more ideal option than Yamamoto, just because of just the, if I'm thinking, the Cubs and everything and spend
cost.
We'll see if they're willing to outbid the Mets and other teams. But Matsui is something that is a player that has proven himself, 236 saves over his career in the NPB, and he's shown to have miles on his arm. And I think we can put the small baseball to the side when we put him out there in hopefully in October, going out there against Harper and Schwarber and some of these teams where we got to get outs against these lefties, because that unfortunately is what killed us towards the end.
Jed Hoyer and his front office are going to pursue these targets this winter, but they're going to have some less familiar faces in that room. On the heels of Craig Breslow to the Red Sox, we share with you another name that might be headed east. Stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jace Medical offers the Jace case. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jace Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand, and it is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's jacemedical.com, J-A-S-E medical.com, promo code LOCKEDON. We're back here on Locked On Cubs. Ty Lewin in for Sam. Cubs Vice President of Scouting Dan Kantrovitz has spoken to the Mets about a front office role. It would be a promotion of his current one as the head of scouting on the north side. This is on the heels of Craig Breslow moving to the Red Sox to run the Red Sox as president of baseball operations. And Ty, this is further proof that not only the Cubs front office is viewed highly around baseball, but that they are deserving of a promotion from their current role.
Truly is. Unfortunately, it seems too fast. If I'm going to be honest. It almost felt like, wow, we're already having these guys gone, which is, a credit to them and the work that they put in. And, when it comes to 3 to 5 years down the road, we'll really see the benefits that came from their work. And I as a fan who loved 2016 and then 2017 until basically up to 2023, we really didn't have what we have now. Mm-hmm. And so it's tough to see these guys go, but those organizations are going to be very happy with those decisions.
Yeah, I understand the Breslow one just because he's becoming the Jed Hoyer of the Red Sox and has history there. This Kantrovitz one, I think it's the Breslow is a major loss, but this one is a surprise just because while he was on that the top perch on the north side, what would his role with the Mets be? I understand it would be a promotion, but you felt like Hoyer and Hawkins could, soften the blow. That if, they were taking on a little bit of water due to promotions to other clubs, they could do that. And Breslow went on his way. But now the next person goes that's right by their side. That does come at a surprise. And it is despite sustained success. They're exiting the rebuild. They're entering a period of contention. You would have thought that these people in the team picture of rebuilding the team would be around to see the fruits of the labor. But as other teams come calling, I suppose that's not the case. So we'll see where that shakes out. And then a couple coaching notes. Still no updates on who the Cubs are going to hire to replace Craig Driver and Chris Young. But Andy Green, as we first reported here on Locked On Cubs, has interviewed with the Angels, Ty. And then Ken Rosenthal reported on Thursday he has also interviewed with the Guardians. And then Northside Baseball indicated Wednesday Mike Napoli might get an interview with the Angels as well. So might have a further exodus from the dugout.
It's getting difficult because, now we've seen, so it's so funny. I was just thinking about Cohen, and he does this whole, there's this whole movement for about a year of all this money that is spent, right?
A ton,
a ridiculous amount, a man that I don't know if he knows the value of a dollar, but
right.
The Mets go out, they get David Stearns. Now they're looking at Craig Counsell, then they get our guy. And it's just, he's completely flipped his mindset as to where baseball is going. Isn't that pretty odd? How he's literally gone from, I'm not going to buy my talent, I'm going to develop from within. They went from, a bottom of the line
in just a 1 year span.
1 year span. It's really, really interesting how the Mets have completely flipped everything. And, credit, again, like we said, credit to the Cubs for what they've done as an organization. But, as we talked about paying our guys, maybe I wish we paid these guys a little bit more to keep them in check. And now we see what's going on with the coaching staff as well. And Napoli is somebody that is really, really hard to go. And I thought he was going to get the bench coach role.
Right. If Andy Green leaves.
So
right. I think so too.
So to hear him now go looking at the Angels, it's hard. But I mean, whoever hired these guys in who hired these coaches within the clubhouse I'm hoping that are the same individuals that are hiring the next group of guys, because they have been incredibly beneficial. And to say David Ross was lucky with having these guys in the clubhouse is an understatement, because now it's going to look very interesting, because if we get a better squad, but now all of a sudden we're lessening our, now our coaching has declined, then we're not on the right track.
Well, and that Andy Green has managed before. He managed the Padres for a few years, but now the Napoli thing around baseball is confirmed. I mean, if he's getting a managerial interview, that means he's viewed pretty high, not just by the team that cashes his checks, but the team that writes his checks, excuse me, but other teams around the league. To go from first base coach to manager. It's not that it's unheard of, but it does confirm what we have thought, that he's legit.
You heard it from Mastro, right? And you can hear it in his voice when he talked about Napoli and what he meant, and how he completely altered his base running mindset and his technique and all those things. And so when these guys unfortunately go, it really is going to make an impact, because that guy was truly loved in that clubhouse by all those players. And, from you and I grew up playing ball. When you have a coach that truly impacts you, and doesn't, and makes his comments and feedback in a positive manner and helping those players grow, even at the major league level, these guys really, truly appreciate that. And so that's going to be an incredible loss to that clubhouse, if it does happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's keep an eye on that and see how the news turns, if it does at all. Coming up next, let's learn a little bit more about Ty as he comes out of the bullpen for this Friday episode. How about a favorite position player and favorite pitcher in his time as a fan of the Cubs? Stay tuned. Today's episode is also brought to you by Ibotta. How does free Thanksgiving sound? This year, Ibotta is here and gives you cash back and helps make sure your Thanksgiving table is complete. Who wants turkey without the gravy? Turkey is great, but we all know the best part of Thanksgiving dinner is the sides. With Ibotta, you can make sure you get the whole family's favorite side dishes and all the turkey, all while getting yourself cash back. Starting November 1st, that's this Wednesday, for the fourth year in a row, Ibotta is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Just add the offers in the app to redeem for everything you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers and upload your receipts. Download the Ibotta app now and use code MLB to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Just go to the Apple App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code MLB. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code MLB. All right, Ty, what do you think? Favorite position player, favorite pitcher? Do you have a favorite team that comes to mind? I'll take anything at this point.
Yeah, no. So I grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago.
Shout out to Dundee Crown.
Shout out to Dundee Crown. Go Chargers. And looking back, growing up, you had those teams in the late 2000s, Aramis and Derek and all those guys that everybody knows. Yeah. But when I think about guys that stayed with it, right, and went through it all, and I know this is a boring answer, but I think everyone could probably agree that Rizzo was the guy that, in my personal opinion, it's gonna relate to my favorite pitcher as well. But it was a guy that he had the ability, and I think about it from this fan standpoint, to be this lovable guy, you know, one of the nicest people on the field. But then we saw in instances with Chapman and other guys where he could lose it, and he had a switch on him that could lose it. And I always thought about that as a leader in the clubhouse, as a leader on the field, because there's a guy that truly cared about winning, but he was going to have fun with it as well. But don't mess with our ball club. And that leads me into my choice as my favorite pitcher, which is probably going to be probably a shaky one here. But I actually love John Lackey as a Cub.
Okay.
I really, really did. You know, I know
that's shaky.
He's and I relate it to an enforcer in the NHL, right?
Yeah,
you see those teams, and I love watching hockey, and I see
he wasn't with them long, but he clearly had an impact,
major impact, and it was a guy he didn't mess with. And I think about those times that, you know, he'd get after the umpires, or he'd get after, you know, obviously go inside on hitters and not really care about going inside at all, and you know, adding that element to that team that, you know, it just made for a perfect storm. And then, you know, let alone then you have some of the best players in the world, and Chris Bryant and these other guys that I have personal opinions about, but we can talk about that in another episode. But these guys were truly people that I felt impacted by as I watched them play. But man, that is a really, really tough question, obviously, because I think about even some of those teams, like we said earlier, that I watched on WGN in the late 2000s, early 2000s, where, you know, you saw these guys walking out there and grinding through every single day, and just seeing how hard they worked and everything. So it's a tough question to answer, but I just loved watching Lackey on the bump and Rizzo over at first. I almost wish that they sign him back for one more year, but, you know, we'll see.
All right, Ty, thank you so much for being here. Everydayers, give Ty some love in the feedback zone, the comments on YouTube, and you could throw him some love his way on Twitter if you so choose as well. His handle is right there at Tyler Lewin. And Everydayers, I also have a link below the description of this episode. I'll put the link directions in all caps to make sure it is clear. But I would appreciate you taking 20 seconds and filling out a Google form survey with 2 questions for Sam and I's inventory purposes here as we continue to grow the show. One question applies to everybody, and the second question applies to Chicagoland listeners and viewers. So again, that link is below the description of this episode, audio and video. Ty, it was fun. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, man. Matt, thanks so much for the opportunity, and hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube as we make the push to 7,000 subs, and smash the like button for the algorithm. Shout out to the audio peeps on Apple, Spotify, Sirius XM, and more. He's Ty Lewin. I'm Matt Cozy. This is Locked On.